We know we're facing both a climate crisis and a biodiversity crisis. Usually, the pushback against doing something about either climate or biodiversity is it's going to cost too much. One of the main reasons for doing this study was to show, in fact, that there are ways where we can just be more efficient, that we can, in fact, address climate, we can address biodiversity without bankrupting people. In fact, as we show, there are many ways that we can improve economically.
I mean, we were thinking about the sort of critical and overlapping pressures that land and nature are facing. You know, they're the bases that we use to grow food and produce a lot of other products that we depend on. But that kind of footprint of use has grown so large that many species are at risk of extinction, and we're sort of threatening the very productivity that we depend on.
This was a first attempt at doing a global analysis of this kind. It is really quantifying the effects of various land use patterns, what they have, what impact that will have on really three sets of outcomes. One is greenhouse gases, so carbon stored in the ecosystem. We also looked at methane, so methane from animal agriculture in particular. We also had various measures of biodiversity. And then the third set of outcomes, we looked at the returns that you get from growing crops or raising livestock or harvesting timber. We combined the models on the returns to crop production and grazing and timber, and with the greenhouse gases and with biodiversity, into something we call the efficiency frontier. It highlights just how much of a gap there is between what we are currently doing and what's feasible. It also shows you what's needed in terms of changes in land use or land management that would move you towards the frontiers.
That doesn't mean that you need to go from where you are all the way to the frontier, but use the analysis as a tool to identify what are the feasible next steps that we can use to provide environmental and economic benefits. And the good news from the paper is that those are available almost anywhere.
There are very few studies that actually address the trade-offs between these competing goals. And another thing that's a really useful outcome of this study is that it not only gives you a sense of where the targets could be for countries to improve in these dimensions, but it also gives a sense of the cost of what kind of financing needs would be required for countries to get from where they are now to the point where they could be on this sustainability efficiency frontier. This analysis shows that in most countries worldwide, there are opportunities to improve both economic output and environmental outcomes at the same time. On average, countries globally can almost double their performance in terms of either economic returns or environment by improving on one dimension without sacrificing on the other side.
We found that in terms of carbon storage and the equivalent for methane, that we get approximately 230 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent stored in ecosystems without loss of economic benefits. And that's equivalent to around 4 years of global emissions.
At an international scale, this information is also really useful for organizations involved in supporting and financing development, such as international finance institutions, to really understand how and where they can direct their resources and their support for countries in a way that helps them meet their national goals, but at the same time, altogether helps meet these international commitments for biodiversity conservation, climate change adaptation, et cetera.
One of the advantages that we find of doing this analysis is that we show people what's possible. And that tends to open their minds to thinking about a wider set of alternatives. When they can see the gain that could be had by making some of these changes, then making some of the changes is not so scary.